Welcome back to the channel. This will be the best wildcard team for Matchday 4 in UCL Fantasy, and you can see the clean sheet odds on screen. Inter Milan are top with a 68% probability of keeping one against Kara Almaty at home. Arsenal, Atletico Madrid, Tottenham Hotspur, Newcastle and Chelsea complete the top 6, all with favourable fixtures on paper. And in last spot is Kara Almaty with only a 3% chance of keeping a clean sheet against Inter Milan away. Just outside the top 6, there are the likes of Villarreal, who are near the bottom of the Champions League table, but they're doing quite well in La Liga. They're only behind Barcelona and Real Madrid in third spot. There's also Man City, Napoli, Juventus, Benfica, Barcelona, Marseille, Olympiacos, PSV, and this is all ordered in terms of the kind of likelihood of keeping a clean sheet. And I took these stats from the website fantasyfootballpundit.com. I refer to them throughout most of my content in UCL Fantasy this season. And here you can see the teams with the least chance or the kind of lower likelihood of keeping a clean sheet. Even Liverpool are near the bottom, facing Real Madrid at home. But the bottom 5 includes Borussia Dortmund, Karabag, Club Brugge, Union Saint-Gilloise, and Kara Almaty, which I referenced earlier. Towards the end of this video, I'll highlight the top 10 captains, but here you've got the goal scorer odds as well. And Lautaro Martinez is top, facing Kara Almaty, which is arguably the best fixture you can get in the Champions League this season. Haaland is second, with Thuram in third, but he is still a doubt to feature in Matchday 4. And hopefully in tomorrow's deadline stream, we'll get a predicted lineup by Sky Sports Italia, who have gotten their predictions absolutely spot on over the last year. We've also got Julian Alvarez in fourth spot, with Osimhen, Sorloth, Lewandowski, Harry Kane, and other players here completing the top 15. That includes Nick Voltemada, who was subbed up for halftime against West Ham in a 3-1 defeat for Newcastle. There's also Victor Gyökeres, who was subbed up for halftime because of a muscular problem, and he has a doubt to even start the game. But we do get the early lineups for Arsenal versus Slavia Prague and Napoli against Frankfurt, and that will be before the deadline locks in tomorrow. So stay tuned for the deadline stream. Kylian Mbappe is just above Gyökeres there, despite facing Liverpool away, and he missed a penalty at Anfield last season during the league phase. Lamine Yamal scored over the weekend in a 3-1 win over Elche. He's also high up in this list. Liam Delap is back from injury, and there's also Richarlison, and also a different player here from Villarreal, Mikauze, who I covered in Euro Fantasy actually last year. It does seem like such a long time ago at this point, but that's because of the fixture against Paphos away. But Villarreal are not doing too great in the Champions League. The same goes for Benfica, who are second bottom, and Ajax are 36th at the moment in the Champions League table. But things will surely change. We've got some mouth-watering ties in Matchday 4 and beyond. I've got the Limitless chip available. I used the wildcard in Matchday 2, and I've gotten multiple green arrows in the process, and you'll see how I did for Matchday 3 in my team selection, so stay tuned for that, and whether I'll be using the Limitless or my 2 free transfers. Like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also hit that notification bell so you're always up to date on my content for both UCL Fantasy and FPL, which I'll cover until the end of this season with many different videos and live streams, so you're always well prepared with ultimate guides for those fantasy formats. There will be, of course, the team selection for Matchday 4 and the deadline stream now, and the Limitless squad was posted on Friday night for channel members and patrons, and it was released for all viewers on Sunday morning. So you do get early access to my videos as a member or patron, and many other perks like priority reply to comments. You'll see how useful that is, because it ensures your questions and comments are answered during deadline streams and in the comment sections of my videos. Join my Discord server, follow me on Twitter, Instagram and Blue Sky, Dylan RCM, for all the updates on UCL Fantasy and FPL. Leave a 5-star review on Spotify, and there are many different ways to support the channel. All of them can be found in the description. Join my UCL Fantasy League as well. It's one of the biggest mini leagues in the world. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it. My squad value in UCL Fantasy is 101.5 million, and it's different to FPL because in that game, there is a difference between selling prices and purchase prices. But in UCL Fantasy, if you buy a player and they go up in price, you also gain that team value. And some people watching might have even more money at their disposal, whilst others will have even less. So you might not be able to build this exact 50-man squad. And if you are starting UCL Fantasy later or have a very low budget like 100 million, then you won't be able to afford this. But I'll try to discuss alternatives as we go along. And ultimately, you've got to play your own game. Use these videos as guides to bounce off ideas. But I think copying is not the way to go. If you want to improve as a UCL Fantasy manager and also find the game even more fun, then I think it's best to make your own decisions. Sometimes you'll get things right. Other times things will go a little bit astray, and a lot of luck is involved in these fantasy games. But the best thing you can do is make your own decisions and back your gut. I'll start off with the 2 goalkeepers, and the most important thing with this position is to have 2 goalkeepers playing on different days, not just for match day 4, but also until we get to match day 8, where everyone inevitably plays at the same time. David Raya is the highest owned goalkeeper in UCL Fantasy, and he's 3rd in terms of points scored in this position, only behind Sommer and Courtois, who is currently top of the standings. And Arsenal didn't concede a single goal in October in over 1,000 minutes worth of football across all competitions. They demolished Atletico Madrid 4-0, despite the fact that David Raya made a mistake in that game. He wasn't punished for that. And there are many games that Arsenal are, kind of having, and they're not conceding a single shot on target. In the Premier League, over the last 4 matches, the stats say they've conceded 1 shot on target. I would urge you to actually see what the shot was. It was Nketiah going for a header, and it was easily smothered by David Raya. So essentially, they haven't even conceded a shot on target in the last 4 because they are so solid defensively. This would also mean that Raya's ceiling won't be particularly high. He is capable of saving penalties, as he did against Porto in the Champions League round of 16 a couple of years ago, and also in certain fixtures like West Ham at home, and he did it in the Champions League against Atalanta last season back in matchday 1. But I think Raya can still get these kind of player of the match awards from time to time. It's kind of rare for goalkeepers anyway, and I think the saves potential will be lower than a Thibaut Courtois or even a Jan Sommer arguably, but I think it's worth doubling or tripling up on Arsenal defensively, except for match day 5. If you've got the wildcard and limitless, I think the best thing you can do is actually wildcard in 4 and limitless in match day 5, because that way, with this squad, you will have a great setup until the end of the league phase. And when a lot of these top teams have difficult fixtures in match day 5, or you might have a goalkeeper clash where they play on the same day, you can just limitless and build an even better squad for that specific match day. So to complement David Raya, I would go for Carnesecchi because they play on different days in every single match day except for Game Week 5, which is coming up very soon. But if you don't have the limitless, then you might have to reconsider this and go for a goalkeeper pairing of Rulli and Chevalier, which I discussed in recent wildcard videos. You're not going to get many clean sheets from Carnesecchi or Atalanta, to be honest, and it's 17 points so far this season for the Italian, which isn't too bad actually, and he did save a penalty back in matchday 1 in a 4-0 loss against Paris Saint-Germain. But Atalanta are 10th in Serie A with 2 wins, 7 draws and 1 loss, and out of the last 6 games, they are winless and drawn 5 of them across all competitions, and that includes a 0-0 draw against Slavia Prague in matchday 3. So Atalanta aren't doing terribly, but they're not able to score enough goals and win these matches comprehensively as they might have done under their previous manager, Gasperini. But I think Raya is essentially the main goalkeeper here. Carnesecchi is a cheaper option to back him up when needed, except for matchday 5. And remember, in matchday 8, just like we do get for the Champions League final in 17, everyone plays at the same time. You can't make substitutions or change the captaincy there, so be very mindful about that. But for matchday 4, 6 and 7, going for Raya and Carnesecchi will do a brilliant job between the sticks. Unsurprisingly, Denzel Dumfries is the highest scoring defender in UCL Fantasy this season. He got 18 points in matchday 3 and forms part of the team of the week, which I'll highlight in my team selection and in tomorrow's deadline stream. But he is a very template option with 33% ownership. I'm quite surprised it's not even higher than that because Inter Milan had the best fixtures for the first 4 match days. However, there is a clear fixture swing in matchday 5, and that's the reason why I haven't recommended Jan Sommer in goal, and I wouldn't triple up on Inter Milan despite facing Matti at home. Now, if you're in a situation where you've got free transfers and you want to save the wildcard for matchday 5 or 6, then I think it's definitely worth going for a triple up in Inter Milan. But looking at the bigger picture and the long term, you will have maybe a few transfers to book in because Inter have some very difficult fixtures on paper coming up, and they have been quite solid. They are second in the Serie A table, just behind Napoli. They closed the gap over the weekend. They're also one of 2 teams to not have conceded a single goal in the Champions League so far this season, the other one being Arsenal, and only 5 teams, which obviously includes Arsenal and Inter Milan, haven't lost or drawn a single game. They've won every single match so far. That also includes PSG, Real Madrid and Bayern Munich. But I think ultimately with Denzel Dumfries, he's a great captaincy option for Matchday 4, and he is fixture-proof, so I don't mind keeping him in the long term. But for those looking to double or triple up on Inter Milan defensively or overall, that would only be for Matchday 4. Afterwards, I think 1, maybe 2 would be enough, but that fixture swing is quite brutal for Inter Milan. The next defender might surprise you, and he was quite poor over the weekend, just like the entire team. But I think Newcastle are worth covering defensively, and Dan Burn is quite nailed on in that team. He's getting a lot of clean sheets and also ball recoveries, so typically he's scoring 8 points in UCL Fantasy. Don't expect that to always last, but Newcastle are in the top 6, as I showed you at the beginning of this video, for the clean sheet odds, facing Athletic Bilbao, who have 2 wins out of the last 10 matches, whilst Newcastle progressed to the next round of the Carabao Cup, and they are the reigning champions of that competition. But in the Premier League, they're really struggling. They're in mid-table, and they haven't won a single game away from home in that division. But in Matchday 4, they are facing Athletic Bilbao at home. The upcoming fixtures are still quite promising. And in Matchday 3, they beat Union... they actually beat Benfica 3-0. And in Matchday 2, they beat Union Saint-Gilloise away from home. So they're looking quite solid in this competition. Of course, they lost against Barcelona 2-1 in the opening matchday. But one of Dan Burn or Trippier could do the trick. I believe Trippier is currently ill though, so bear that in mind, and I wouldn't double up on Newcastle defensively, especially after that performance against West Ham, where they were thoroughly beaten. I think that was a well-deserved defeat, and they ultimately weren't good enough on the day. But the next defender is quite nailed on in this team. There is a risk of rotation, I think, with the amount of defensive depth this team has, but Gabriel is the best Arsenal defender and asset overall. He is third for UCL Fantasy points scored amongst defenders. Only Nuno Mendes and Dumfries are above him, and in FPL he is by far the best option there. He is getting 9 to 12 pointers consistently because of DEFCON, which is defensive contributions, a similar system to ball recoveries from UCL Fantasy. He's getting bonus points in every single match, so essentially he's getting player of the match awards in the Premier League. He's scoring and assisting, and Arsenal are keeping clean sheet after clean sheet. After Slavia Prague, it is Bayern Munich, but you would still back the Gunners to win most of their matches until the end of the league phase. That includes Kara Almaty in Matchday 8, which is a home fixture for Arsenal, but by that stage, they might have already qualified directly in the top 8, so they don't need to play the knockout playoff rounds. And if that's the case, you could expect rotation in such a plum fixture against Kara Almaty at home. So we can't predict exactly what's going to happen in December and January, which is why some people might argue it's best to save the wild card for later in the competition. I have no regrets so far about playing it in Matchday 2 with over 100 points in back-to-back match days, but ultimately you will have a lot of suspensions and injuries to contend with over the coming months, and there is an international break coming up very soon after Matchday 4. But with Arsenal, I think it's worth doubling up on them defensively. There's even a case to triple up in certain fixtures like Slavia Prague away from home, and in the Premier League that has been a very popular strategy in FPL to go for Raya, Saliba, and to be honest, I think Saliba is probably a worse option in FPL. I'd be more keen on him in UCL Fantasy, but I think Gabriel, Timber and Raya would be a great triple up in FPL. Not so much in UCL Fantasy in the case of the Dutchman though. I think Timber is worth avoiding. I could see Ben White starting in Matchday 4, for example, so be very wary about that. Gabriel and Raya is all you need in UCL Fantasy, particularly with Bayern Munich looming large, and for those without the limitless chip to use in Matchday 5. But let's complete this defensive line with 2 more options, and this player scored a brace very recently and got 23 points against Everton, and that's Mickey van der Ven, who's actually doing quite well in terms of UCL Fantasy points. He's right up there in terms of defenders in the top 6, and Spurs are unbeaten in the Champions League, but that includes 2 draws, and they are not in a bad position necessarily. They're kind of mid-table in that Champions League phase table, but I think ultimately they would be quite disappointed. They were quite fortunate not to lose against Monaco, but over the weekend they were thoroughly beaten by Chelsea. It was only 1-0 in terms of the scoreline, but Van der Ven actually lost the ball and Caicedo pressured him into a mistake and Joao Pedro scored the goal. So Tottenham Hotspur have been quite poor in home matches. They are 17th in the Premier League at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, but away from home, they are top of the division and remain unbeaten. So they are a bit Jekyll and Hyde at the moment. They're struggling to create chances, and despite being in a decent position in the Premier League, in 5th spot, there are some question marks already about the playing style and the longevity of their tactics. But Van der Ven is benefiting from the set-piece plays and the improvements defensively, and that's why he's a solid option in UCL Fantasy. I sold him in Matchday 3, one of my mistakes, I believe, for the previous Matchday, which I'll talk about in the team selection, but his ownership is 12%, he costs 5 million, and he also has produced 23 points, facing Copenhagen at home, who are near the bottom of the Champions League table. You would expect Spurs to win that game, and they're also in the top 6 for the clean sheet odds. Now, to be frank, I'm not completely settled on this fifth defender. You might be tempted to double up on Newcastle defensively against Athletic Bilbao, or even for the next 2-3 match days, and then diversify your defensive line a little bit. And even going for someone like DeMarco or an Inter Milan defender who is poised to start against Kara Almaty would be brilliant, but it would be a transfer waiting to happen in matchday 5 from my perspective. But the last defender is a long-term option. I don't like him for the upcoming game against Bayern Munich, but I do like this defense in general, and I think Bacho, with the ball recoveries and also the consistency, can be a great long-term choice until matchday 8. But I do admit that for matchday 4, this doesn't look great. And for anyone who is asking about limitless teams and they've got a PSG defender as good as Nuno Mendes and Hakimi are, I wouldn't back them to keep a clean sheet against Bayern Munich. This will be the best tie on paper. You've got first versus second in the Champions League table facing each other, and that would be a great test to see where these teams are at overall. But PSG haven't been at their absolute best, in my opinion. They are top of Ligue 1, but they have dropped a few points here and there. They're not winning every single game or showing that consistency they did towards the end of last season. And of course, they went on a massive run from late November to basically May, and that's where they won everything that there is to win in French football and the Champions League itself. So whilst I like Hakimi and Nuno Mendes, and you can certainly consider them, I think Bacho offers great value at 5 million. And ultimately, if you want to build this exact 15-man squad, and if you want to get to one of those premium defenders, you have to downgrade somebody else in this team. But I think long-term Bacho's the one. I was originally thinking of Trippier or a different Newcastle defender, but I'm less sure about doubling up on them defensively. I think one is probably enough. Ben Sebaini's on penalties, but he's facing Man City away. He's been very consistent in the Champions League this season with ball recoveries and returns, with 2 penalties scored so far in this competition. But let's move on to the midfield. I also encourage you to leave your thoughts down the comment section below. Which defender would you pick to complement Van der Ven, Gabriel, Byrne and Dumfries? Maybe you would get rid of one of them as well. So I'd be keen to hear your thoughts. Let's get this video to the 200 likes on YouTube and close in on 37,000 subscribers, which is our goal by tomorrow's deadline stream. Inter Milan got a massive win over the weekend, and Çalhanoğlu provided an assist in that game. It was a 2-1 victory, and they won it at the death through an own goal. But Inter Milan have been quite consistent under the new manager this season. They had a bit of a shaky start. They lost the crucial game recently against Napoli, but since then, Napoli dropped points, of course, in a goalless draw against Como at home, and Inter Milan capitalized, and they are closing in on the Serie A champions. But with Chivu, for example, he has done some good things and ultimately maintained a very consistent formula, which Simone Inzaghi was pretty much always synonymous for in the Champions League and Serie A over the years, and nothing's really changed from that perspective up until now. But Inter Milan have had very favourable fixtures, and after the Kara Almaty game, I think there is a clear shift. So I would be open to selling Çalhanoğlu in matchday 5 or 6, but he is fixture-proof and on penalties, so there's always a chance of him producing returns. But my favourite Inter Milan option, irrespective of any fixture swings or downturn in form, would be Denzel Dumfries in that defensive line. The next midfielder has been awful in FPL, but an absolute gem in UCL Fantasy, and that's Anthony Gordon. He cost 7.1 million, his ownership is 9%, and he produced a goal and assist against Benfica, and Newcastle are doing quite well in this competition. It's another home game here, and that's why I would favour Anthony Gordon, and perhaps a double up in Newcastle overall, but I wouldn't be going for a triple up. And as much as you could go for a sort of punt of Trippier and Byrne, or going for Nick Pope and stuff like that, I just don't think it's worth it in the long run, and Newcastle have been quite inconsistent across all competitions. But Gordon has been doing the business in the Champions League, so I think he's worth including in the wild card. But of course, he was subbed off at halftime, just like Nick Voltemada. That is a serious cause for concern, and Eddie Howe probably had enough of what he saw against West Ham, who had no Premier League win at home since February, yet they beat Newcastle 3-1 in the end. Now, the next midfielder has been a bit disappointing this season in the Premier League. He's had a few injury issues, and he costs a lot of money in both fantasy formats. And in UCL Fantasy, it's 9.5 million. Bukayo Saka is facing Slavia Prague away. Remember, we do get the Arsenal lineup, so you don't have to be like, oh, but is he going to start or not? This might be an issue in future match days, but not against Bayern Munich. If Saka is fit, he will definitely start that game. But Slavia Prague, of course, is the game you really want him for. And Declan Rice is currently the best Arsenal midfielder in FPL and UCL Fantasy. However, Martinelli has been the one scoring the goals in this competition. He missed the recent matches due to injury. He picked up a problem towards the end of the Crystal Palace game as a substitute, and he has scored in every single Champions League game so far this season, just like Anthony Gordon. If Martinelli is fit and starts the game, I would be tempted to go for him actually, but I'm not sure if that will be the case, and I believe Martinelli could be rested again. Now, Gyökeres was also subbed off at half-time, which is a shame. I think he could be a great captaincy option. If he does start, I'd also be tempted by Gyökeres up front, but in that position, you've got Mbappe, Kane, Haaland, not to mention Osimhen, Lautaro Martinez and Alvarez, so that position is very competitive. I think the midfield is maybe a bit more closed this season, where we're gravitating towards the same options, with Musiala injured for most of the season, and also Cole Palmer is still missing out. So we're all gravitating towards the same options here, despite Vinicius Jr. being reclassified from a forward to a midfielder. But Saka has the highest ceiling of any Arsenal midfielder, that's for sure. And Declan Rice is one yellow card away from suspension, and the next game is Bayern Munich. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Rice on the bench, so I wouldn't be recommending him in UCL Fantasy just yet. But in FPL, I've been talking about this for the last couple of days. I think he's a clear purchase in that game. And for UCL Fantasy, I think he's still a good option, but I'd rather go for Bukayo Saka. There's a big difference in price, I recognise that, but I am going for similarly priced midfielders to Rice and covering other teams instead. That will include Igor Paxao, who only cost 6.2 million, and he was impressive last season for a different club in PSV Eindhoven, I believe, and now he's playing for Marseille, facing Atalanta at home next. His ownership is quite low, at 5%, and he offers real consistency. He's not getting many goals or assists in Ligue 1, but most importantly, he's doing it in the Champions League, so a similar theme and story compared to Anthony Gordon. But the fifth and final midfielder is going to be someone who was an absolute hero for me. I bought him very late on in the deadline stream, and he scored a hat-trick in the early kickoff against Olympiacos, and that's Fermin Lopez, who got 2 assists against Elche over the weekend, and in recent matches, he actually scored against Real Madrid in El Clasico, despite the fact that Barcelona lost that game. They're 5 points behind them in La Liga, but they're still second and within touching distance, and in the Champions League, they're still going quite strong, despite a loss against PSG at home back in Matchday 2. They won the other games against Newcastle away and Olympiacos at home, and Fermin Lopez offers brilliant value. Now, you might be thinking, what about Lamine Yamal? There could be a way of going from Saka to Yamal and doubling up on the Barcelona attack. I'm less keen on covering them defensively. They just seem to concede in every single game across all competitions, but they've got some decent fixtures overall. There is Chelsea coming up very soon in Matchday 5, but there's also Frankfurt and Club Brugge, where I believe Barca might struggle defensively, but they're going to score a lot of goals and create plenty of chances, and Fermin Lopez is the most informed Barcelona attacker at this moment in time. Erling Haaland is second in the Goalscorer Odds for Matchday 4, facing his former club Borussia Dortmund, who have been quite solid defensively this season. They're currently sitting third in the Bundesliga table, and they're also unbeaten in the Champions League so far, but Man City are also in a similar position to them, and they are fighting to basically leapfrog the other team definitively and rise up the rankings in the league phase table. But Erling Haaland, unsurprisingly, scored a brace against Bournemouth over the weekend. He is the go-to captain in FPL and one of the standout forwards in UCL Fantasy, but he was a bit disappointing, I believe, in Matchday 3. Only 1 goal against Villarreal, no Player of the Match award, no assist, nothing like that, but he is going to tick over very nicely. He has more goals than games played in the Champions League, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. And it's very difficult, I think, if you have to pick 2 of the 3 big hitters up front, because Harry Kane, despite facing PSG and Arsenal away over the next 2, he's fixture-proof and he can score against absolutely anybody, and he got a rest over the weekend as a substitute. He came on against Bayer Leverkusen in a 3-0 win for Bayern Munich. The same applies to Michael Olise as well, but Bayern Munich have won 18 consecutive games if you include friendlies. They are on absolute fire right now. And Man City, despite losing to Aston Villa recently, they're still going quite strong and they're building some consistency. They are second in the Premier League table, 6 points behind Arsenal. And if any team can challenge the Gunners this season, I believe Man City will be the one. And it's down to Pep Guardiola and Erling Haaland. The next player is Kylian Mbappe, the most highly owned player in the game with almost 70% ownership. It is Liverpool away next, a fixture he struggled in last season when Kelleher saved a penalty, but luckily for him, Kelleher is no longer there. He is at Brentford nowadays, and Mbappe scored another brace, and Real Madrid won 4-0 against Valencia. So they're top of La Liga, they're going strong. The only kind of blip recently was losing 5-2 to Atletico Madrid, and against Juventus, it wasn't pretty, but they got the job done with a 1-0 victory. Arda Güler was the standout player in that match, and he offers decent value in the midfield, but I wouldn't pick him over the likes of Igor Paxao, Anthony Gordon, and Fermin Lopez. The last forward completes an offensive double-up. He only cost 7.3 million in UCL Fantasy, and that's Marcus Rashford. For a similar price, I would consider Victor Osimhen, who was a standout player in Matchday 3 with a brace. He also had so many shots, which you'll see in my team selection as I break down some of the stats, not just for Matchday 3, but also across the entire competition so far. And Rashford has been very consistent with the goal contributions. He got another one over the weekend against Elche, and I think he is a shoo-in at the moment for Barcelona and one of the standout players in the Champions League. He scored against Newcastle back in Matchday 1. It was a fantastic strike. He also got a few returns against Olympiacos, and he offers great value in this position. But I absolutely hear it about what about Alvarez and Lautaro Martinez and all these players. You simply can't have them all. And with Inter Milan, I already stressed the fact that they've got a clear fixture swing against them in Matchday 5. That doesn't mean you have to ignore a triple up because they face Cara Matti at home now, and it's a great opportunity. And that's why the timing with the wildcard can be very important. So if you are wildcarding this week, you can go for a triple up in Inter Milan, but that means when you have 2 transfers in Matchday 5, you might have to sell some of these players. And if other issues arise like suspensions and injuries, particularly over the international break, then you won't be in a great position to deal with them. So what I'm trying to ensure here with this wildcard squad is that you don't book in too many transfers and make sure that you're well prepared for the rest of the season, because the league phase continues until January, and by the end of late January, that's when we can start building our teams for the knockout playoff rounds with unlimited transfers. But until then, we get 2 free transfers in every single match day, and if you roll, you get up to 3. That can only be done in the league phase. Now, in terms of the captaincy, it's worth going through the dates. So make sure that your first captain plays on the Tuesday, and the same goes for your starting 11. Don't leave any Tuesday players on your bench. Start them, and then after those games are done and before the Wednesday games begin, you can make substitutions and change the captaincy if necessary. The first captain I would recommend is probably Mbappe, but you can definitely go against him on the Tuesday. You'll see my top 10 captaincy list very soon. But on the Wednesday, I'm more keen on Haaland and keeping things very simple there. I wouldn't mind a Fermin Lopez, Rashford, maybe Yamal for those that own him, but I think Erling Haaland would be a very reliable option against Borussia Dortmund at home. The way he's playing, I could see another brace or hat-trick in the Champions League. Now, if Saka starts on Tuesday, I think he's another great option for the captaincy on the Tuesday. And remember, if you are wildcarding, you can still make changes, see these lineups for Arsenal versus Slavia Prague and Napoli Frankfurt, and then lock in your final wildcard squads. But I would always recommend having a clear idea of what you want to do, have backup plans if necessary. Check out my Limitless and wildcard videos. The same goes for my team selection, so all bases are covered, and the Limitless is a real possibility for me in Matchday 4 or 5. You can always go about things a little bit differently, and if you really want someone like Alvarez or Lautaro Martinez up front, then it would require a downgrade elsewhere. Something like Saka to Elise could do the trick, but you might need even more money in the bank to get to Lautaro Martinez, who costs 9.5 million, whilst his fellow Argentine Alvarez is a bit cheaper at only 9 million. So I do like this sort of structure as well. It's identical. Obviously, you see Bacho there completing this team. You might want to go for Ben Sabani because he's on penalties and can get ball recoveries, but it is Man City away this week. I think long term, that could still be quite a decent move. And I wanted to highlight just a few differentials and also changes just in case you weren't completely happy with certain picks. You might even want to go for Harry Kane over one of Haaland or Mbappe, but I wouldn't be going for a double up in Bayern Munich offensively, as good as they are with Elise and Kane when they're facing PSG and Arsenal away over the next 2. They might win those games or get really good results and performances, but I just think the ceiling will be far lower compared to the other players I highlighted throughout this video. But Alvarez would be a top recommendation from me in terms of Matchday 4 and beyond. Even on the Limitless, I think he'd be one of the top forwards. I like Osimhen, Lautaro Martinez, of course the big 3 up front in Haaland, Mbappe and Kane. And in the midfield, you've got Yamal, who is another consideration. But because Fermin Lopez has really rose to the surface in the last couple of weeks, and he has been the most informed Barcelona attacker, there are also reports about Yamal struggling with an injury that is reoccurring. I think it's probably best to go for the better value here and go for Fermin Lopez to cover that Barca attack. You've also got Rashford as a forward who could also be considered, as talked about throughout most of this video. And as you can see, I've got money in the bank here if I went for Ben Sabani over Bacho. I don't think there are many standout defenders, to be fair. It's quite congested and competitive when it comes to the standings in that position. The same goes for the midfield and even forward line, to be fair. We have many different options and there's no clear formula and also guarantee of success in terms of I'm picking the absolute best option in every single position, but this will give you a great platform for green arrows, winning your mini leagues and rising up the rankings throughout the league phase. And now it's time to show you the top 10 captains for Matchday 4. UCL Fantasy is about opinions, just like football in general, so let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below about the best captaincy options for Matchday 4 and also long-term choices until the end of the league phase, which is in Matchday 8 in late January. But Anthony Gordon is 10th, facing Athletic Bilbao at home, who have been in very poor form this season, only 2 wins out of the last 10 matches. Newcastle have 6 wins out of the last 10, but they are struggling in the Premier League for consistency. That's something they have been doing in the Champions League with those massive wins over Union Saint-Gilloise and Benfica, and Gordon was pivotal in those 2 wins. I've got Harry Kane in 9th, despite facing the Champions League winners in Paris Saint-Germain. That's going to be a very tough test, but if I had to pick one forward or attacker from those 2 teams, then it would be Kane, especially in the long term. But I think for the next 2 match days, Kane could be avoided or at least skipped because he's facing PSG and Arsenal away, arguably 2 of the best teams in the world right now, just like Bayern Munich. Bukayo Saka is 8th, facing Slavia Prague away. We'll find out if Saka starts that match. I believe he will. And Victor Gyökeres was a serious consideration for me. He played magnificently in the first half against Burnley. The overall play in terms of the passing, the hold-up, also the finishing, even though it was a tap-in in the end, but it was a complete performance for Gyökeres, and unfortunately he was subbed off with a muscle injury. So let's see if he starts tomorrow, and if he doesn't, I still think he could be a nice consideration in the long term, particularly after Matchday 5, but it would be a shame, of course, to see Gyökeres miss out. I believe Merino will start up top for the Gunners. Mbappe is 7th, despite facing Liverpool away, and the Reds have really struggled recently with 6 losses out of the last 8 matches, but it's still Anfield, and in the Champions League, special things can happen in that stadium. But Real Madrid, of course, are the kings of Europe with 15 Champions League titles at this point, and they're always looking for the next one. Rashford is 6th, facing Club Brugge away. Not an easy fixture, but Barcelona would still be the heavy favourites, and I would back their attackers to do very well. That includes Fermin Lopez, and in terms of value, I think he offers the best right now, but Yamal is 2nd in my camps list, as you can see, and Rashford also makes this top 10 list. In terms of the top 5 though, I've got Lautaro Martinez and Dumfries facing Cara Almaty at home. There is a possibility for rotation, and if we see a heavily rotated side in a Sky Sports Italia predicted lineup, then that would be very concerning, to be quite honest with you, and I would probably avoid the likes of Dumfries and Martinez if they are not in that starting 11, because afterwards you've got poor fixtures as well. Off the bench, these players can certainly do something against Cara Almaty, but we also saw a lot of rotation in Matchday 3 as well. The likes of DeMarco were on the bench, so I don't think Inter Milan players are completely safe from rotation, but Alvarez will start against Union Saint-Gilloise. I think he's a great captaincy option and one of my favourite choices on the wildcard limitless and with free transfers. And of course, above Yamal in top spot is Erling Haaland facing his former club, Borussia Dortmund. He is scoring more goals than games played, not just in the Champions League, but also in the Premier League. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it insightful, then like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also hit that notification bell so you're always up to date on my content, both FPL and UCL Fantasy. Let's get this video to over 200 likes and close in on new goals like 37 for our subscribers. Follow me on X, Instagram and Blue Sky, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the championships, further likes to my videos, proud to comments, amongst many other perks. My Discord server, the UCL Fantasy League, and Spotify can also be found in the description. I'll see you tomorrow for the next deadline stream, and keep your eyes peeled for the Matchday 4 team selection in UCL Fantasy.